Okay, so next reading is article and in ethical and professional standards is guidance for standards 1 to 7. So as we discussed in previous class that there are 7 standards and these standards are the explanations or to the code of ethics, or these include the details to the code of ethics. So within these 7 standards there are sub-standards as well. So you are supposed to know the name of the standard and the definition of that standard, and also the names of sub-standards and the definitions of those sub-standards and their application. The first one is professionalism, and within professionalism there are 4 sub-standards. So there are details and detailed definitions of each of the sub-standards which you can read through and go through. I will only touch upon the key points and then we'll move on. So within professionalism there are 4 sub-standards. First sub-standard is knowledge of the law. Knowledge of the law means, or knowledge of the law says, that you should know what law is. You should know what are the what are the ethical actions, what are the unethical actions. You should also know what is the local law in the country, and you should act upon it. So knowledge of the law means it is your responsibility to know the law. You cannot say that I do not know the law, that's why I have it, or I do not know what is ethical or what is unethical, or I do not know what the standard says, and so I have violated it. So you should know the law. Secondly, maybe there is a conflict between law in a country or in a jurisdiction and the ethical standards as per CFA Institute. So there can be a conflict, that is maybe something is allowed under law but not allowed under CFA Institute standards. Something might be as allowed under CFA Institute standards but not under law. So whenever there is a conflict, you should go with the more conservative one. If any action is not allowed in any of these, then you should not do it. So if something is allowed under CFA Institute standards but not allowed under law, you should still not do it. These are the key points with respect to knowledge of the law. Wherever in whichever country you are operating, you should follow its law as well as the standards. Both need to be followed. Participation and association. So members should dissociate themselves from ongoing client that is illegal or unethical. So if you are working on a client or something which you think is illegal or unethical, you should dissociate yourself from that activity. You should first approach supervisor on compliance department. So whenever you find such an illegal activity or unethical activity, you should approach your supervisor or compliance department after dissociating yourself. So first you dissociate, and then you approach your supervisor or compliance department. If you continue to participate despite knowing it is illegal or unethical, then it will be known as, or it will be considered a violation of the standard, or it will be considered as knowing participation. So if you do not take any action and continue to be a part of it, you do not dissociate yourself, you do not inform a supervisor or compliance department, then it will be considered that you are also involved in that, you will be considered a part of it. You can confront wrongdoer, but that is not a requirement. So you can or you cannot confront wrongdoer. So you can do it or you cannot do it, that is not a violation. Even if you do not do it, but as long as you dissociate yourself and you approach supervisor in compliance department, that is fine. There is an example. Which of the following is a correct statement of a member's or candidate's duty under the code and standards? In absence of a specific applicable law, if law is not available in a jurisdiction or other regulatory requirements, the code and standards govern the member or candidate's actions. So this is correct. If law is not present in a jurisdiction, then you will have to follow code and standards. If a law is present, then you will have to follow both. So you cannot say that because a law does not exist, then I am not bound to be ethical. So even if law does not exist, you have to follow code and standards of CFA Institute. When they say code and standards, it means these codes and standards which we are studying. A member or candidate is required to comply only with applicable law. Not only with applicable law, he should also comply with the code and standards. A member or candidate who trades securities in a securities market where no applicable local laws or exchange rules regulate the use of material non-public information, may take investment action based on that. So even if there are no laws, he cannot take action on non-public information, material non-public information. Why? Because CF Institute code and standards do not allow that. So even if law is not present, he should follow code and standards and should not act on material non-public information. So this is again wrong. So no matter if law exists or not, you have to follow code and standards. And if law exists, then you have to follow both. And if there is a conflict, you follow the more stricter one. And it is your responsibility to know the law and to know the code and standards. Second sub-standard in professionalism is independence and objectivity. In your analysis, you need to be independent and you need to be objective. By independent means that your analysis or your recommendation should not be influenced by others. So for example, there is a company X and you are giving a recommendation on company X, a buy or sell call on company X, you are doing its research. So company X may provide you some gifts or may provide you some facilities or may provide you some benefits in order to get a good recommendation, but that should not influence you. So your independence should not be sacrificed. Or let's say maybe your boss is a good friend with the company X management and he asks you to issue a good recommendation. So that should not influence you. Your recommendation should be independent. In addition to being independent, it should also be objective. That is, it should be clear. You should be able to clearly state your recommendation or your analysis. Do not let investment process to be influenced by external sources. Modest gifts are permitted, but inform the employer about these. So you can take modest gift. By modest gift means small gifts which are not assumed or which are not expected to impact your independence. For example, a calendar, cup, or something like this. So small gifts are permitted to be received. But even if you are receiving them, you should inform the employer about these gifts so that your employer know what you are receiving from client. If gift is for future performance, then you cannot accept it until and unless you take permission from employer. You can accept it, but not until you take permission from employer. So for example, your client says that if you make him a 20% return, he will give you a free vacation, or he will finance your or fund your vacation. So that you can accept it, but first you need to take a permission from employer. Distinguish between gifts from clients and gifts from entities seeking to influence. Allocation of shares in oversubscribed IPOs to personal accounts is not permitted. So if there is an oversubscribed IPO, or it is also known as hot issue, if there is an hot issue, then that hot issue or that oversubscribed IPO is that IPO in which demand for IPO, demand for shares is larger than the supply or larger than the shares being issued. So that means there is more demand. So if there is more demand and it is a hot issue and you know that the price will go up immediately after the IPO, then you should not allocate shares to your personal account. You should allocate shares to your clients or to your customers. So your customers or clients come first and then your personal interests come in. So you should not allocate shares of oversubscribed IPO to your personal account. हाँ, तो जब IPO करते हैं, so if you are a portfolio manager, you will be buying shares of that IPO for your client. So if it is oversubscribed IPO, you should not buy it for yourself. You should only buy it for client and not yourself, because already there is a large demand. So you should first serve the interest of your client. So for oversubscribed IPO, you should not allocate shares to your personal account. Do not issue favorable research due to investment banking relationship. So let's say there is an investment company, it has an investment banking division and it has a brokerage or equity research division. So maybe investment banking company has a relationship with company X, investment banking division or department has a relationship with company X, and they are doing a deal with company X. Maybe they are doing IPO of X, or maybe they are working on a deal in which they are selling X or anything like that. So they want a better valuation for company X. You are an equity research analyst and you are doing valuation for company X. So your research should not be influenced by the investment banking relationship. Although they have relationship, let their work be separate from your work. These two should remain be separate. They should not be able to influence your research. Use effective firewalls between research and investment banking activities. That is, both should be operated separately. There should be effective firewall. There should be no information sharing between the two, because investment bankers would have confidential information about the deals, about the transactions and all that, and that should not be shared with the accurate research. Do not be pressured for issuing favorable research by the companies. Use a variety of sources such as suppliers, customers, competitors for research, and do not just depend on information from management. So once you have taken information from management, you should also take additional information from other sources. You should not just depend on information from management. Issuer paid research may result in potential conflicts. So if, let's say, there is a company X, it wants a research to be done on itself. So it can come to you and ask to do a research on itself, and it can pay for it. That it says that it will pay for the research. So that is allowed. This is known as issuer paid research. But even if it is issuer paid research, it should not influence your independence. It still needs to be independent. Although you are doing for this company and it is paying you, but still it should be independent. Issuer paid research may result in potential conflict. Therefore, analysts' compensation for such research should be limited, and a flat fee structure is preferred in this case. So if you are receiving a flat fee, so that for example, let's say company X says that I will pay you, for example, $1,000 for this research. So or company X can say that I will pay you $500 plus let's say some percentage of shares, or some shares, or some percentage based on the performance. That is, if my stock price goes up, let's say by 20%, I will pay you an additional $500. So a flat fee structure is preferred. Why? Because there is a potential conflict of interest otherwise. If analyst research or analyst compensation is linked to company's performance in future, then analyst will be biased towards issuing a favorable research, because he knows that if company's price goes up in future or value goes up in future, I will receive a higher compensation. Best practice is to pay for own commercial travel when attending information events. So for events, maybe company is willing to finance it or finance your whole trip, but best practice is that you pay for your own commercial travel. Sorry? Conferences or any other events or any other sessions or conferences or any such event. Meetings or an investment management firm has been hired by ATV Corporation to work on an additional public offering for the company. So there is an investment management firm. It has been hired by ATV to work on an additional public offering. The firm's brokerage unit now has a sell recommendation. So this firm has two units: investment banking division investment banking division and brokerage division. ATV will obviously be working with the investment banking division for offering for new public offering. Firm's brokerage unit now has a sell recommendation. So this is brokerage unit. It currently has a sell recommendation on ATV. But head of investment banking department has asked the head of brokerage unit to change the recommendation from sell to buy. So this investment banking division head has goes to brokerage unit head and asked to change the recommendation from sell to buy, so that he can get a good price for ATV's shares. According to standards, the head of brokerage unit would be permitted to. So should he change the recommendation or not? He should not change the recommendation. He can change the recommendation, but not due to investment banking division asking for it, but due to any changes in ATV. If ATV really gets better, then then after doing his complete research, he can change it, but not due to investment banking division asking to change it. It needs to be independent. Independently, it can be sell or it can be buy. but needs to be independent. Increase the recommendation by no more than one increment. No, he cannot change the recommendation until and unless he has done or performed independent analysis. Place the company on a restricted list and give only factual information about the company. This is a best practice. So whenever you get hold of any non-public information, whenever you get hold of any material non-public information, or you get to know about any material non-public information, then the best practice is that you put that security on a restricted list. Restricted list is that list on which trading is not done. So any security which you or any company which you put on restricted list means that you will not be issuing a research on it, or you will not be trading it. And give only factual information. That is, stop giving the recommendation. Only give factual information. By factual information means giving ratios, giving financials and all that. Do not give your own views or own recommendation. So this is the best practice whenever you get hold of any non-public material information, because once you have it, then you can use it for your own use, or you can maybe it can influence your decision. So B is the answer. Assign a new analyst to decide if a stock deserves a higher rating. No. So now you have some non-public material information. You cannot do it like having a new analyst to find out if it deserves a higher rating. Ward is scheduled to visit the corporate headquarters of Evans Industries. Ward expects to use the information he obtains there to complete his research report on Evans' stock. Ward learns that Evans plans to pay all of Ward's expenses for the trip, including cost of meal, hotel room, and air transportation. So Evans' company is actually financing whole of the trip, including meals, hotel room, air transportation, and everything. Which of the following will be the best course? So best would be that he does not take any of such facilities from Evans. Accept the expense paid trip and write an objective report. Pay for all travel expenses, including cost of meals and incidental items. So best is that you pay for everything yourself. The best course of action is to avoid conflict of interest whenever possible. Therefore, for Ward to pay for all his expenses is the correct answer. Answer C details a course of action in which the conflict would be disclosed, but the solution is not as appropriate as avoiding the conflict. So first, or the best practice is to avoid the conflict completely. If then you are not able to avoid the conflict and the conflict stays, then you disclose it. Third substandard within professionalism. So we are still on first one, which is professionalism. And first substandard in professionalism was knowledge of the law, and second was independence and objectivity, and now third is misrepresentation. Misrepresentation says that you should not misrepresent your impression or misrepresent your performance. So do not try to misrepresent to give false impressions. The standard includes oral and electronic communications both. It includes guaranteeing investment performance and plagiarism. So you cannot plagiarize. If you plagiarize, that will be a violation of this standard. You cannot guarantee investment performance. So remember, you cannot guarantee a performance. You cannot say that I will make you 10% return, or you cannot say this investment will give 15% return, because you do not know what the return will be. You cannot guarantee a performance. You can say that if this happens, then the expected return is 10%, expected return is 15%. You cannot guarantee a performance. If you guarantee a performance, that is misrepresentation. Knowingly omitting such information which might affect an investment decision. So for example, let's say your portfolio generated a 30% return over the past 3 years. But that 30% return, or over the past year, but that 30% return that you generated over the past year was not due to your decision, but because one of your client went against your decision. So for example, you asked to buy X, but your client you asked your client to buy X, but your client said that he does not want to buy X, he want to buy Y, and he forcefully bought Y. And Y, let's say, gave a 50% return and X gave a 10% loss. So this 30% return was on overall portfolio was a result of the client's decision and not yours. So although your portfolio performed 30%, but that wasn't due to your capability, that was due to your client's decision. So let's say now you go to a new client, client Y, and you tell him that your portfolio has made a 30% return over the past year. This client will think that you are a very good portfolio manager, so you have made a high return. So you have omitted some information which is relevant to decision by this client. So this is also misrepresentation. Models and analysis developed by others at members firm are the property of firm and can be used. However, a report written by another analyst cannot be released by another analyst's name. If some other analysts have produced some work, you can use it. Why? Because that is the property of firm. But if an other analyst have written a report, you cannot release it by your name. It has to be his name. So again, examples. Gray recommends the purchase of a mutual fund that invests solely in long-term US Treasury bonds. He makes the following statements to his clients. The payment of the bonds is guaranteed by the US government. Therefore, the default risk of the bond is virtually zero. This is a correct statement. Why? Because for US Treasury bond, payment is guaranteed by US government. That is correct. US government has the backs the Treasury bond. And as government is backing it, the default risk is assumed to be virtually zero. This is correct. If you invest in mutual fund, you will earn a 10% rate of return each year for the next several years. Now he is guaranteeing a return. So this is wrong. You can say that you may earn or the return is expected to be 10%, but you cannot say you will earn a return. So statement 2 is a violation. Michelle tells a prospective client, I may not have a long-term track record yet, but I am sure that you will be very pleased with my recommendations and service. In the 3 years that I have been in the business, my equity-oriented clients have averaged a total return of more than 26%. Now he is telling a new client that his total return have been 26% a year in the past 3 years. The statement is true, but she only has a few clients, and one of his clients took a large position in penny stock and realized a huge gain, and that position was against his advice. So this large return caused the average return to exceed 26%. Without this one investment, average return would have been 8%. So that means true return due to his capabilities is 8%. But due to client's decision, it has gone to 26%. So he is omitting some information which can change the decision of new client. So this is a violation. Yes, because statement misrepresents the track record. And the last substandard is professionalism is misconduct. So members and candidates must not engage in professional conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or commit any act that reflects adversely on their professional reputation, integrity, or competence. So for example, coming to work being drunk, that is will be a misconduct, or doing anything dishonest, fraud, or anything that is misconduct, anything which reflects badly on the profession. So if let's say you support a cause, so let's say there is a social cause and you support a cause, and for that cause there are some rallies being arranged and you are joining that peaceful rally. So you can do that. That is not a misconduct. But if there is something, for example, happening against the profession or against against something ethical or against the state or something, and you participate into that activity, then that is misconduct. So Joseph Karloff acts as a liaison and between Pinnacle and Summit. When Summit underwrites an IPO, Karloff routinely has Pinnacle issue vague statements implying that the firm has a cash flow, financial resources, and growth prospects that are better than the case in the reality. So when an IPO is about to happen, Karloff asks Pinnacle to issue these such statements, which is not the reality, which are better than the reality. Why? Because so that they can uplift the investors' confidence in the stock and then get a better price. So most likely a violation of misconduct. This is fraud. This is dishonesty. So it is misconduct. Any problem? Okay, so that was professionalism. Next is integrity of capital markets, and there are two substandards: material non-public information and market manipulation. So what is material non-public information substandard? It says that you cannot trade on material non-public information. If you have material non-public information, you should not trade on it. So as we discussed, best practice would be that you place it on a restricted list and stop trading it or stop issuing a recommendation on it. No, so you cannot trade on any material non-public information. Any information which is non-public and material, you cannot trade on it or act on it. You should stop your trading, put it to restricted list and should not trade, because that will be unfair to those who do not have that information. So what is material non-public? There are two things: non-public and material. Non-public means any private information which has not been made public as yet, which has not been announced or which has not been released to public. Material means anything which can impact the decision. So any such information which is non-public, which public does not know, and which has the potential to impact someone's investor's decision, that is material non-public. If you have material non-public information, you should not trade on it. If there is an information which is non-public but non-material, then you can trade on it. That does not matter. If there is any information which is material but public, you can trade on it. But if there is any information which is material and non-public, public does not know about it and it is material, then you should not trade on it. Another key concept related to it is mosaic theory. So if you have non-public information, and apart from that, you also have another information which is non-material. So if there is an information which is non-material and non-public, and you combine this non-public, non-material information and do some analysis, and based on your analysis you come up with an expectation or conclusion, that is allowed. That is mosaic theory. So for example, if you went to a restaurant or something, or a public place, and there you saw the executives of two different companies, X and Y, meeting up on a lunch or dinner or something, that is non-public information, but that is non-material as well. Any management of the two companies can meet for a lunch or for anything. This is non-material. It cannot impact someone's decision. Now you are doing your analysis, and based on your analysis you find out that X and Y can be a very good match. Y has an opportunity to acquire X, and X has an opportunity to be acquired by Y. This is your analysis. This is not public info. This is not this is no information which you have gotten from anywhere. This is your own analysis. So this is material, but this is public information. So based on public information, based on the public financials, based on the public information, you find out that, or your analysis says that these two can merge. So you link these two nodes and you think that a possible merger can happen between these two companies. This is non-public, non-material. This is material plus public. This is your analysis based on public information. So this is your analysis. This is no one has given you this information. So you think that a merger can happen between X and Y. Now this is your analysis. You do not have any information about it, and based on that you form a conclusion. Your conclusion, for example, you say that there is a possibility of merger between the two companies. Why? Because it makes sense to merge for these two companies due to these reasons. It will give this value to this X, this is value to Y, and if they merge, then the value of overall can increase or something. Now based on your analysis, you have given a conclusion this is not violation. But if you have this information, if you get to know from somewhere that they are merging, then that is material non-public information. You should not use it. Andrews, a private wealth manager, is conducting interviews for a new research analyst for his firm. One of the candidates is Wright, so he has come for an interview. He is an analyst with a local investment bank. During the interview, while Wright is describing his analytical skills, he mentions a current merger in which his firm is acting as a advisor. Andrews has heard rumors of a possible merger, but no releases have been made by the companies concerned. So that means it is non-public information. And it is material. Why? Because this can impact anyone's decision. Wright has disclosed it in the interview, so Wright is in a violation. He shouldn't have disclosed the material non-public information. Now Andrews also know about it. Andrews has got to know. Now Andrews have know about it from Wright. So Andrews now show that this is happening, and so now Andrew has non-public material information. Which of the following actions by Andrews is least likely a violation? So Andrews have non-public material information. So what should he do? If he has received a non-public material information, what should he do? He should not trade, and best action is he should put it on restricted list and stop trading on it. Waiting until next day before adding on the information to allow for it to become public. No, why? Because even next day it might not become public. If it becomes public next day, that is fine. So once it is public, then you can trade. But if it does not become, but you do not know if it will become public or not. So if you wait till next day and then you trade it, and you say that I have allowed a fair time to become public and it did not become public, then that is wrong. It becomes public. If it becomes public, then it is public, then it is no more non-public. Notifying, but you do not know if it will become public or not. Notifying all investment managers in his firm of the new information. So absolutely wrong. You cannot tell others about the new information. You have received it yourself, and now you are notifying even your managers so that they can buy the shares or they can trade on it for their clients. So this is wrong. Placing securities mentioned as part of the merger on the firm's restricted trading list. This is not a violation. Any problem? Next is market manipulation. Market manipulation says that you should not manipulate the market artificially. So manipulation can be of two types: information based and transaction based. Information based is that, let's say there is a company X and you have bought the shares of company X and now you want it to go up. So what you do is you start issuing information into the market which is fake. That is, company X is doing this, it is doing that, and its share will go up and that, and its volumes will go up or something like that. So if you are issuing information which is not real, just to build up the sentiment or uplift the sentiment so that you can benefit from your investment, that is information based market manipulation. You are sending some information into the market which can lead to an increase or decrease in value of an asset. That is manipulation. Or it can be transaction based. Transaction based means, let's say there is a company X. It has very low liquidity, its trade does not usually happen. So what you do is you start buying it. When you start buying it, and from another account you start selling it. So you sell from one account and buy from another account. So what would happen? Volumes will start going up artificially. When volume starts going up artificially, others will jump in and will start trading in it. As they trade in it, its price will go up and you will sell and exit. So what you have done, you have created artificial volumes through transaction, or you have given wrong signals through transaction. So you are manipulating the market by transaction. So any such kind of manipulation, information or transaction based, are not allowed. So questions: Green Brothers, an emerging market fund manager. So Green Brothers is a fund manager in emerging market. Has two of its subsidiaries simultaneously buy and sell emerging market stock. So he has two subsidiaries. For example, one is buying and one is selling, and both are the subsidiaries of this Green Brothers. In its marketing, so why would it be doing it? Maybe it is doing it for increasing the volumes and do transaction based market manipulation. In its marketing literature, Green Brothers cites the overall emerging market volume as evidence of liquidity. First, he is creating volume himself, and after creating volume, he is sending out this information in the market or writing it in literature that the volumes have increased. As a result of his action, more investors participate in emerging market fund. They think that volume has increased, but he himself increased the volume. Then he himself informed the others of increase in volume. So this is a clear market manipulation. He has manipulated the investors. So violated the standards for market manipulation. So that is standard 1 and standard 2. Third standard is duties to clients. Before we go into duties to clients, one key point to remember with respect to CFA Institute standards is and code of ethics is that you should as a member or candidate you should put the integrity of investment profession on top. If there is anything which hurts the integrity of investment profession, you should not do it. Even if it is favorable for client, even if it is favorable for employer, favorable for yourself, you should not do it if it is against the integrity of investment profession. Then comes interest of clients. So you should first protect your interest of client. If there is something which is favorable for client but not for employer, you should do it for client. So first you should serve the interest of client and then comes other interest. After serving the interest of client, you should serve the interest of employers. And after employers come your own interest. So any decision should first protect the integrity of capital investment profession, then it should be in interest of client, then employer, and then your own interest. This is the hierarchy to be followed. If there is anything which is in interest of client but against integrity of investment profession, you should not do it. If there is anything which is in your interest but against the interest of employer or client, you should not do it. So this is the hierarchy which needs to be followed. Now let's come back to the standards, which is duties to clients. So within duties to client, there are 5 sub-standards. First one is loyalty, prudence, and care. It means that you should be loyal to your client. And whenever you are taking any decision for client, it should be prudent. It should be rational, it should be logical, and you should do it with care. So you should exercise prudence, care, skill, and diligence. Manage clients' assets in accordance with governing documents. So you should take those, your decisions should be aligned with the governing documents. For example, IPS, investment policy statement. Make investment decisions in context of overall portfolio. Client brokerage should be used to benefit the client. So for example, there is a client, you are managing his portfolio, you are a portfolio manager. So you are managing his portfolio. When you manage his portfolio, you will buy and sell securities. When you buy and sell securities, obviously there will be a brokerage house through which you will buy and sell. So when you are using a brokerage house to buy and sell securities, you are giving business to this brokerage house. So in return, it might give you something like, for example, research reports. Right? Brokerage houses also provide research report, or it might provide you some other facilities or some other benefits. These are known as soft dollars. Or a brokerage house might provide some commissions. These are known as soft commissions. So these soft dollars or soft commissions which you are receiving, which are commissions in some other form, so these should be used in the interest of the client. Why? Because you are trading client's money. So this benefit which comes in this benefit belongs to the client. So it should be used in interest of the client. Identify the client. The client might be investing public as a whole rather than specific entity or person. Vote proxy. So for example, let's say there is a company X. It has a pension fund. Company X comes to you. You are a portfolio manager and asks you to manage this pension fund. Your client now is not company X. Your client are these pensioners or the beneficiaries of this fund. So you should manage it, or your loyalty should be to these pensioners. Loyalty should not be to the management of the company. Vote proxies in a responsible and informed manner. However, due to cost benefit analysis, it might not be necessary to vote all the proxies. Which statement about a manager's use of client brokerage? Any question? Sorry? Last point is that, for example, if you have a client or different clients, you are managing a portfolio for them, or you are a mutual fund. Now you are buying and selling shares on behalf of your client. So if there is a voting happening for shareholder, who has the right to vote? Client. But you can vote proxies. So who has the shares? You. So indirectly it belongs to client, but who will be voting? You will be voting. And that is known as a proxy vote. So you can vote proxies, and you are required to vote proxies in a responsible and informed manner. You should vote proxies in an informed manner, in such a way, in a responsible manner, in such a way that it benefits the client. It is in the benefit of client. But maybe at times you do not have, maybe at times voting proxy is not required. So for example, you know that vote is happening, but it is not very relevant. So you think that cost associated with this voting is actually higher than the benefit. That is, if you travel, if you go and actually vote, and if you do all the research, that will have some time cost, that will have some other cost, traveling cost, and you think that cost associated with it is higher than the benefit. So you can choose not to vote the proxy. So you are not required to vote all the proxies, but whenever there is relevant, you are required to vote proxy in responsible and informed manner. If you are not voting proxy, then that should only be in the case when due to cost being higher than benefit. These are recommendations which you can go through. Which statement about a manager's use of brokerage commissions violates the code and standards? A client may direct a manager to use their client's brokerage commissions to purchase goods and services for that client. So whom does this commission belong to? This belongs to the client. So if client himself is asking to purchase something, then that is fine. You are not deciding yourself, client is deciding, so that is fine. Client brokerage commissions should be used to benefit the client, correct, and should be commensurate with the value of brokerage and research services received. So brokerage commission should be aligned with the services that are being received. So let's say there are two brokerage houses, X and Y. Y has a high fees, X has a low fee. You choose to go with Y. So there should be a reason for going with Y. If Y is providing enough of services or enough of research or something additional which is in favor of client, then you can pay a higher fees. Otherwise you should go for X. So whatever commission you pay, that should be aligned with the services being received. Client brokerage commission may be directed to pay for the investment manager's operating expenses. This is wrong. You cannot use client's commission to pay for your own operating expenses. Stewart has been hired by Goodner Industries Inc. to manage its pension fund. Stewart's duty of loyalty is owed to management of Goodner? No. If it is pension fund, then it is to pensioners, participants and beneficiaries of pension plan. Shareholders? No. So you should be very clear who is your client. Although Goodner is managing you, Goodner is paying you, Goodner has appointed you, but your client is not Goodner. Your client is the beneficiary of the fund. Any problem? Another example, Stafford is a portfolio manager for a specialized real estate mutual fund. Her firm clearly describes the fund's prospectus. In the fund's prospectus, its soft dollar policies. Stafford decides that entering the CFA program will enhance her investment decision making skill and decides to use soft dollar account to pay registration exam fee for the CFA program, which is correct. So can she use client soft brokerage to pay for her own fees of the exam? No. She did not violate? No. Specialized, her firm clearly describes firm's prospectus in the firm prospectus its soft dollar policy. Stafford violated the code and standards because improving her investment skill is not reasonable use of the soft dollar. She can improve her investment skill because that will benefit the client. But if he is improving her investment skill, that shouldn't come at the cost of the soft dollar account. So violated the code and standards because improving her investment skills is not a reasonable. So this can be or cannot be true. That, let's say C, Stafford violated the code and standards because CFA program does not meet the definition of research allowed to be purchased with brokerage commission. So C is the most appropriate answer. The definitions which you have for using soft brokerage commission, in that you cannot use it to pay for the fee for CFA program, but you can use it to improve your investment skill, because improving your investment skill will provide additional benefit to the investor. So for example, if you use it for research, if you use it for any other analysis, that will help benefit the client. So C is the answer. Soft dollars accounts should be used only to purchase research services that directly assist the investment manager in investment decision making process, not to assist the management of the firm or to further education. It cannot be used for further education, but it can be used for getting the services which can help improve investment decision making for the client. Because in B they say, because improving her investment skill is not a reasonable basis. Improving investment skill can be a reasonable basis, but how you improve it is the question. If you are improving it through education, then that is incorrect. If you are improving it through research, then that is fine. So we are still on duties to client. Next in duties to client is fair dealing. Fair dealing says that you should be fair with all the clients. So if, let's say, I have client A, client B, client C, I should be fair to all the clients, unbiased. And by fair, it means that I should not discriminate between these clients. So for example, let's say if a trade comes in, I know this stock is going up, is going to go up. So I should inform all the clients about it at the same time. I cannot do it that I first trade for A, then for B, and then for C. Or I first inform A, then after a day I inform B and C, or after 2 hours I inform B and C. All need to be informed at the same time. That is fair dealing. If I have an oversubscribed IPO, I should benefit all of them for that IPO. I should not give all the benefit to one of the clients or over allocate to one of the clients. Any problem? But so assuming that all of them have the similar characteristics, all of them want the shares. So then allocation to all of them should be proportionate. Okay, so any problem, question? But maybe let's say there is a client for who is willing to pay higher for better service. So what you can do is you can make different classes. So for example, you have made a gold class, you have made a platinum membership, you have made a silver membership, platinum, silver, gold and silver. So in that case, you still need to be fair. That is, you should allocate everything to all of them at the same time. You should trade for all of them at the same time. You should inform all of them about a change at the same time. But what you can differentiate is that, let's say you can say that A is a platinum member and C is a silver member. So you can say that when new information comes in or when my recommendation changes, I will email all of them, and then I will especially call A and tell him about the change. So you informed all of them through email at the same time, but then you gave an additional service to A by calling him. So everyone was informed at the same time, but then A is reminded that an email has been sent to do it. So you can do that. But then again, remember that for any such classes that you have made or any such differentials which you have, all the clients should be allowed to choose for it. So if let's say C wants to be a platinum member and he is willing to pay for it, then you should allow him to be a platinum member. You cannot say that this membership only will remain be with A. Any problem? Now with respect to investors, there are two types of investors: institutional and individual. So remember, you should not provide any preference to institutional investors over individual investors. So institutional investors should not be provide any preference over individual investors. Both should be treated the same way and fairly. So institutions are large institutions, you have big business coming in from them. So you may want to provide a preferential treatment, but you should not. You should not. Do not discriminate. Fairly does not mean equally. As we discussed, it does not mean equally. It means you can give additional services for higher cost. Different service levels, however, should not negatively impact or disadvantage any client. Disclose the service levels to all clients. Make premium level available for all those who wish to pay for it. Give all clients a fair opportunity. If client is unaware of a recommendation change, advice of change in recommendation. So let's say there is a security X and you have a buy recommendation on it. Now you have done some more research, something has changed, and you have changed your recommendation from buy to sell. A client calls you and asks you to buy X. As client is asking you to buy X, you can buy for client. Buy because this is your recommendation. You cannot force client to do it. You have a recommendation to sell, but client is asking why, you can do it. But remember that before you accept this order, you should tell the client that you have revised the recommendation. Maybe client hasn't seen it, maybe he hasn't checked his email, or maybe he does not know about it. And maybe he is placing a buy order because he thinks that you are recommending buy. So you should tell of the recommendation change before accepting order. And then if he says that no, he still wants to buy or sell whatever, then you do it. Which one of the following actions will help to ensure fair treatment of brokerage firm clients when new investment recommendation is made? Inform all people in the firm in advance that a recommendation is to be disseminated. No, you should not inform all the people in the firm. Why? Because if you inform them, they will trade for themselves. You should first inform all the clients, and before clients you should try that no one else get to know about it. So as soon as you have a change, you should quickly communicating it to the client before others get to know about it. Distribute recommendations to institutional clients prior to individual. No, why? Because you cannot give preference to institutions. Minimizing the time between decision and dissemination of recommendation. So as quickly you do it, better it would be, because clients would get to know about it quickly. Smith, a research analyst with brokerage firm, decides to change his recommendation from buy to sell. He mails this change advice to all the clients. The day after mailing, a client calls with a buy order. So he should accept the order. He can, but first he should inform about the change in recommendation. Advise the customer of the change in recommendation before accepting the order. So B is the answer. Not accept the order. So this is fair dealing, loyalty, and fair dealing. Next is suitability. Suitability says that your investment should be suitable to the client. So you should ensure that whatever investment you are making, that suits the needs and objectives of the client. And when and how do you know what are the objectives or needs of the client? You know it through IPS. That is, you meet the client and then you understand the client and then you form a document that governs your trades. Secondly, needs of client can change over time. So IPS needs to be updated to be sure that it is according to the needs of client. And IPS should be updated at least annually. It does not mean you cannot update it more frequently. You can update it monthly, quarterly, whatever, but at least annually, not more than, you should not delay it more than a year. A standard regarding suitability most likely requires that an advisor must analyze an investment's suitability for the client, correct? Prior to recommending or acting on the investment. So A is your answer. Next substandard within duties to client is performance presentation. Again, it states that you should not misrepresent or misstate the performance. And if you have stated an information which is brief, then you should make detailed information available on request. So you may not want to write down all the information, but you should make it available on request. Example, paper was recently terminated as one of a team of 5 managers of an equity fund. So there was an equity fund. It was being managed by 5 different managers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One got terminated to reduce cost. In a letter sent to prospective employers, so this terminated one is now sending a letter to prospective employers to get a job. Paper presents with written permission of the firm the performance history of the fund to demonstrate his past success. So in this letter he mentions that the history of this fund or performance of this fund, and he says that this performance of this fund is actually a reflection of his past success. So is it a violation? Why? It is a violation because this fund's performance does not reflect only his performance. It was due to the team effort. It was due to the performance of each one of them, not only his decision. So paper did not violate. No, paper violated codes and standards by claiming the performance of the entire fund as his own. Correct. So he should have only claimed the performance of that part of the fund which he managed himself. And last substandard and duties to client is preservation and confidentiality. It says that you should preserve confidential information and you should not share the confidential information of a client with or any information of the client with anyone else. So information of the client should be preserved and kept confidential. It should not be shared with anyone else. But if let's say if that is a regulatory requirement, for example, their regulators ask you for information, then you should disclose it. Or if let's say CFA Institute professional conduct program asks you for it, there is an investigation going on for which they need information, you should disclose it. Otherwise, you should not disclose it. This applies to current clients as well as former clients. So it does not mean that if someone is no more your client, then you can distribute the information or you can share the information. It should still be confidential. But you can share it if it is related to illegal activities, if disclosure is required by law, or if client permits disclosure of the information. Townsend was recently appointed on the board of directors of a youth golf program that is the local chapter of a national not-for-profit organization. the program is beginning a new fundraising campaign to expand the number of annual scholarships it provides. Townsend believes many of her clients make annual donations to charity. So this is an NGO, first of all. Townsend believes many of her clients make annual donations to charity. The next week in her regular newsletter, this is a regular newsletter, nothing special being done. To all clients, she includes a small section discussing the fundraising campaign and her position on the board. So she is just communicating about the fundraising campaign. First thing, she is not asking or soliciting the donation. She is not forcing the client to donate. She is just using it as a forum to communicate. So she is communicating a fundraising campaign. That is fine. Why? Because she is not forcing them to donate. Second, this is being done for an NGO, for a social cause. She is not asking for donation for herself or something. Third, she has also disclosed the conflict of interest. She has told that she is a member of the organization's board. So her position on the board is disclosed. So that conflict of interest has also been disclosed. So everything seems to be in shape. She did not violate code and standards. Correct. Any problem so far? That was duties to clients. So we first did professionalism, in which these are the 4 substandards: knowledge of the law, independence and objectivity, misrepresentation and misconduct. So you should know the standard name, substandard and standard name, and you should know what it means or what falls in it. But when you keep on practicing it, it will become easier. So you wouldn't actually have to memorize everything. You will automatically memorize it once when you practice questions. Then we did integrity of capital markets, in which we did material, non-public information and market manipulation. And duties to clients, in which we did loyalty, prudence and care, fair dealing, suitability, performance presentation and preservation and confidentiality. After duties to clients, next is duties to employers. And there are 3 substandards again: loyalty, additional compensation arrangement and responsibilities of supervisors. Loyalty, so as in client we know that loyalty is to be loyal to client. Again in employer as well, loyalty is to be loyal to employer. So that means you should be loyal to employer. By being loyal means that you should not engage into any activities that can harm the organization or deprive it of a benefit. You should place client's interest over employer's interest, which we discussed earlier as well, but employer's interest over your own interest, that also we discussed. You should not have incentive and compensation systems that encourage unethical behavior. Independent compensated practice is allowed. So for example, you have a client, you have an employer X, you are a portfolio manager at X. Client, and this is your client, you are managing his portfolio through X. Client is giving you an additional compensation. Client says that if you perform well, I will give you an additional compensation. So taking additional compensation is allowed, but notification should be provided to employer, including the details related to compensation, duration and nature of activities. Independent practice is only allowed if employer accepts its term. Continue to work in the employer's best interest. Sorry, this is not independent compensation. This is additional compensation. Additional compensation will come in next substandard. Independent compensation is, for example, I am a portfolio manager here managing it. On weekends, I am running another business, and with that I earn some money. So that is allowed, but notification should be provided to employer, including the details related to compensation, duration and nature of activities. Continue to work in employer's best interest until resignation is effective. So if you have resigned and let's say your resignation period is 1 month, that is it will become effective after 1 month. So during that period, you should continue to act in employer's best interest. You are still an employee and you have all duties of being an employee. Following activities in scenario of resignation may be considered violation. So if you have resigned and if you misappropriate the trade secrets, misuse confidential information, solicit employers' clients prior to cessation of employment, self-dealing, misappropriation of clients or client list, all these are considered violation after resignation. Let's say that you have resigned. Now you want to approach the clients for the new business. You have moved to a new firm and now you want to approach the clients. So remember, until and unless your resignation becomes effective and your employment ends, you cannot approach the clients of your firm to tell them that you are moving to a new firm. You can only approach them for the new firm once your employment has ended and you have moved. Secondly, as you are an employee, you would have some client list, maybe on your personal computer or on your home computer or on your mobile phone. You will have some client details or client list. You cannot use those lists or details to reach these clients. Why? Because that is the property of the firm. Even if you kept it on your home computer or whatever. But you can use, that does not mean that you cannot invite those clients or reach out to those clients. You can use public information or you can use your own memory to be able to reach out to those clients and then invite them to the new firm. Employer records are the property of firm. However, simple knowledge of names and former clients is generally not considered confidential. Use of experience and knowledge gained at the former employer is not prohibited. You can use that knowledge elsewhere. However, you cannot take documents or models with you. If you created a model when you were an employee there, then that is a property of that firm. You cannot use it outside that firm. Protecting employers' interest is secondary to protecting integrity of capital markets. Even if you are an independent contractor, you should abide by these terms. Any problem? Which of the following statements is correct under code and standards? CFA Institute members and candidates are prohibited from undertaking independent practice. No. Written consent from employer is necessary to permit independent practice that could result in compensation or other benefits in competition with a candidate's employer. If independent practice results in a competition with your employer, then written consent is required. Otherwise, if it does not result in competition, then you can inform them. Still, you will need to inform, but written consent is not required. And the standard B is additional compensation arrangement that we just discussed. That, for example, this is company X. You are a portfolio manager in X, and X has a client. You are managing client's portfolio, and client says that he will provide you additional compensation. So you can take it, but you should inform your employer, and you should take written consent from employer. So written consent can be taken through an email. Make immediate report to the employer as specifying compensation they propose to receive for services in addition to compensation and benefits provided by employer. Details of this report should be confirmed by the party. When you provide this report to X, client should also confirm that yes, these details are correct. Report should state the terms of any agreement. These terms include nature of compensation, approximate amount, duration of agreement, and others. This is allowed, but you need to inform employer. Jurgen is a portfolio manager. One of her firm's clients has told Jurgen that he will compensate her beyond the compensation provided by firm. This is fine. Additional compensation is allowed on the basis of the capital appreciation of his portfolio. So what should she do? She should turn down the compensation? No. She can take this compensation. Turn down the compensation? No. Obtain permission from her employer prior to accepting compensation arrangement. C is the answer. And last substandard within duties to employers is responsibilities of supervisors. So remember, if you are a supervisor, you are not only responsible for your own ethical behavior, you are also responsible for your team's or department's ethical behavior. So let's say if you have a team, you are a responsible A, B, C, these are your team members. You are responsible for their ethical behavior as well. But it does not mean that if they act unethically, then you will be charged for it. It means that you should do enough effort to ensure that they do not perform unethically, or they do not get into unethical actions. Even then, if they are doing something unethical, then you are not charged for it. But if you haven't created that environment, if you haven't communicated the standards to them, if you haven't communicated the code to them, if you haven't created an environment or a structure where ethics are followed, then you are in violation. So you need to create that environment, you need to communicate policies, you need to develop policies. If then someone is still do something unethical, then you are not charged for it. That is one key point to note. Another key point to note is that whenever you detect a violation, or whenever you think that there can be a violation, that is, you are suspecting a violation. So whenever you are suspecting violation of an employee, you should limit his or her activities and start investigation on the possible violation. So you should start investigation, and when investigation starts, you should limit his or her activities. That is another point to note. Third important point is that let's say there is a company X, it is giving you a supervisory position. It has asked you to take a supervisory position. You know that the ethical standards in this company are not in place. Ethical policies are not in place. So you say that I cannot take a supervisory position because ethical policies are not in place. Let's say then company X says that okay, you can come in, make the policies and set up the structure. Still you cannot take supervisory position. You can only take supervisory position once you know that appropriate and adequate procedures are in place. Otherwise, you cannot just think that I will join in and then I will create procedures. You should only take the supervisory responsibility if adequate procedures are in place. Miller heads the research department of a large brokerage firm, and this I think is also this recommendation is important. If a violation is discovered, what should you do as a supervisor? You should respond promptly, conduct a thorough investigation, increase the supervision, or place appropriate limitations on the wrongdoer pending the outcome of the investigation. Till the time outcome comes in, you should limit his activities. Miller heads the research department of a large brokerage firm. The firm has many analysts, some of whom are subject to code and standards. If Miller delegates some supervisory duties, which statement best describes her responsibility? So this is Miller. She has some team members A, B, and C and D. And they would also have some team members. So if Miller delegates some duties to A, still Miller will be responsible for those duties. So Miller's supervisory responsibility do not apply to those subordinates who are not subject to code and standards. No, even if they are members and candidates of CF Institute or not, Miller's responsibility is to ensure that that is being followed. Miller no longer has supervisory responsibility for those duties designated. No, even if she has designated a duty, she is the supervisor, so she has a responsibility. Miller retains supervisory responsibility for all subordinates despite her designation of some duties. So C is the correct answer. Let's take a break.